Hi, it's Leah Cochran, and I'm back with my entries 16 through 26 for my reflection notebook. Entry number 16, these are notes that we had to take on the 5 areas of reading. So here I just kind of outlined the entire thing with important points of each. Here's the back side of my notes, and I highlighted each of the, I keep going backwards, each of the 5 areas. So some of what I have: phonological awareness. Phono means sound, so that's how I remember it. And examples like respond to rhyme and alliteration. So an example of that of alliteration would be Sally sold seashells by the seashore, blah, blah, blah. And I have examples of each so I can remember. Entry number 17 was reading comprehension models. So I printed out each of the models that we were given, and then we had to compare and contrast each of the models. So for my contrast points, I had the 3 key question model provides strategies for evaluating each step of the reading comprehension, and the other model does not. The 3 key questions also makes no mention of how reading is altering or enhancing the previous knowledge. Another point for contrast is comprehension model processes. Comprehension processes model breaks down areas of comprehension. For example, visualizing is a discrete part of comprehension instead of a supporting evidence. And the last point that I have is that the 3 key questions model is sequential, or it looked sequential to me. So question 1 is the most basic level, and then it gets progressively more difficult. And then to compare, I only had 2 points that I could think of, and the first was that they both contain the same information. They may have used different wording, but for example, visualizing, summarizing, fixing, and then the next comparing point is that both structures look for purpose. So this one isn't as fancy as my last entry. I tried to jazz it up a little bit, but mostly it's just note-taking. Next entry was number 18, the house, and we were supposed to be looking for purpose. So I printed out the house, and then there's my purpose. So I wrote down each question so I can remember what the heck I was doing when I go back in this later in time. The first is, what do I think the purpose of the house is? So just initially, before I tried to think about any other purpose, I thought it was to describe the appearance of both the exterior and interior of Mark's house. I wasn't quite sure why they were being so descriptive about the remodeling and how each room was set up. So I thought that maybe in the future they were going to reference some type of person who was going to need to know the layout of that, or you as a reader would need to know the layout of the house for something in the future. So I was predicting something in the future might happen, like a burglary, or they were selling their house, or there was going to be something hidden in the house that you would have to know kind of the structure and the setup and what was happening. That was really a lot of detail. I wondered a lot of things. Okay, so the next one was, what would the purpose be if it focused on the boys skipping school? I said to acquaint the reader, and I spelled that wrong, to acquaint the reader with the boy's character. So they mentioned several times, which I thought was interesting, things that kind of pointed to one of the boys' character. He talked about stealing money. He was constantly kind of bragging, and he was focusing on the negative traits, like pointing out negative things, like, hey, look at this leak in my bedroom. And I know that's not a really big one. That was like my least favorite point, but it's still like was focusing on how he liked to point out bad things, and I think that may have been just a slight clue. What would the purpose be if it were a thief? It highlights how to infiltrate the house. So the entire layout, and then it also mentions the valuable items inside of the house. And then real estate, it's describing the renovations that they have done and the complete layout of the house in detail. So that was it for entry 18. Entry 19, essential questions. So here's my, it won't focus. Okay, entry 19. There's just several essential questions for biology. I could have written probably 4 pages worth of these or more. So just a couple. How do we know if something is alive? That's one of the first things we cover at the beginning of the year. How does life emerge from chemical structure and function? So that's kind of asking for macromolecules and how they contribute to the structure of life. How does cell structure function maintain life? How is structure related to function at all levels of organization? And how do organisms maintain homeostasis between internal and external environments? So those are just a couple that I came up with. I think I actually may have looked for help on that too, just to make them good. The next one was number 20, making predictions. So there was a story that we had to listen to, and we listened to it before, but I tried to remember back to what my predictions were initially, and pretend like I had never heard it before. So I added some questions in here that I had just initially had, because in the beginning I wasn't sure, like, is she scared of the soldier, or it was kind of neutral on that. She saw the soldiers, and they were coming through her town, but it didn't describe whether she was scared or not. And I guess the absence of fear would mean that she wasn't, but I wasn't sure about that. So I included quotes from the book. Tanks are smelly and hurt the ears, so I predict that she will not have a positive attitude or experience towards the soldiers, and that was kind of foreshadowing. Toys float down the river. I predict that the story will revolve around children, not just Rose Blanche, but she saw particularly a toy, so that was kind of like foreshadowing that somebody had lost that toy. The mayor grabs the little boy and smiles at the soldier, so I predict this book will not have a happy ending, and also mention how the sky was gray. So that kind of was, I would think it was a little bit of a hint. It's not a happy setting in that story. Everything's kind of muted and very like blah sounding. So it's not like sunny skies and it's all gonna have a happy ending, and it didn't. So I was right initially. Why are trucks, that was one of my questions, why are the trucks driving away at night? Why do they have their lights off? I still don't know that, even after listening to it twice. But students can make predictions or kind of conjecture why they think that. I have several guesses. I wish they would have answered that. Why do people make predictions? So this is the next part. Why do people make predictions? To actively engage in reading, to completely understand the author's message, and there is a point to every part of the story. So just like in a movie, when you see certain scenes, usually you can connect that to something that happens in the future, and the author has a message and a purpose behind everything that they're putting in there. So if there's something that seems confusing, why did they add that to their story? They must have added it for a reason. Does every book end the way I thought? Does the book end the way I thought? Nope. I was pretty surprised by that ending initially. I did not expect Rose to die, even after, especially after revealing her kind nature and how she sacrificed so much for those kids, and she lost weight and sacrificed her own food for those kids. So I didn't expect her to die at the end. And then notes. Oh yeah, that was my note about reading it. Okay, next entry. You had an example of your parent letter, and I think that's a great idea. I send home a video permission form at the very beginning when I have parents sign the syllabus, so I'll just add that one right in there. It'll be easy. So parent communication. How will I communicate with parents? So that's my little note for the next email. So I started off, I've only been teaching for 2 years. This is going on my 3rd year, but I started off the year by emailing all the parents and kind of letting them know how my class works, what I was going to be doing in the beginning of the year, what stuff I was going to send home, so they would kind of know what was going on. And then another way is the Remind app. So that's a really good one if students don't really communicate well with their parents. You can, on orientation, give the parents your code, and then every time you have a quiz or a test or something important happening that's going to be crucial to the student's grade, you could just send out a Remind app, and it tells everybody what's going on, parents and students. And then phone calls. I did this pretty faithfully my first year, kind of dropped it off the second year because it takes a lot of time, and I had a baby at home, so I was trying to rush. But I called the first year not only for behavioral problems and to talk with parents, like if anything ever escalated in my classroom, I would always just kind of check home, and that usually remedied the situation pretty quick. But not only that, but I did call home for good behavior as well, or to say like some students did exceptionally well in this test, or just to compliment their behavior for their parents, which, you know, I thought a little kudos couldn't hurt. The next one was entry 22, and we could either work on our paragraph or add to vocab. So I did add to vocabulary, and I just have to find, I left a post-it note in here for the page that I had. My vocab, I added to my alpha block C0. Can you see that? So some of the words I added, inference, 5 areas of reading, comprehension strategies, predictions, visualizing. I added a bunch. So my next entry was number 23, and it was goal setting. And the question, here's my notebook. I made it pretty with this one, or try it. The question was, why is screening before the year begins important? So first, I could anticipate the needs of my students. So are they high-level students? Are they low-level students? Do they have behavior issues, reading levels? So how many of each group do I have? Do I have a bunch of high-level readers? Can I pick out some reading material that's going to be a little more challenging? Or do I have a lot of level 1 and 2s that I'm going to have to accommodate some stuff for them? Next, to adjust my instruction based on the needs to ensure student success, so that kind of relates to the first one. To have a starting data point or data points of student strengths and weaknesses, to differentiate for each student, and to receive feedback from other instructors on student performance strengths and weaknesses. Okay, my next entry was 24, and there wasn't really a question or an instruction on what to do for this, so I just kind of made it into my own. I made a little suggestions or ideas for me to use in the future. I could use this as an all-inclusive tool for any IEPs or 504s, reading interviews for project and group work, writing workshop for laboratories and short answers, and I can also include test scores, past EOC scores. Or not EOC, other scores from other tests. The next entry, and I'm sorry if I'm going fast, but I only have 3 minutes left on this free trial. This was my text structure, and so the question was, how are you taught text structures? And I did all right on the quiz. Growing up, I was an avid reader. And although I may have been taught how to identify text structures, I can't remember. I think it was pretty intuitive to me. I was familiar with reading directions, so sequential text, and I also loved historical books, so I was familiar with chronology, cause and effect, science-related text. I love those. My last entry was a reflection on assessment and how I would use it in my classroom. So here's my reflection. It is necessary to view assessment holistically in the classroom. An assessment of any child should begin before entering the classroom with screening. Screening is a useful proactive process to gauge a student's readiness, and once the school year has begun, a teacher can diagnose the student's strength and areas of need in order to improve throughout the year. Intermittently, the teacher can observe progress via observation or interviews. In addition, both formative and summative assessments can allow a teacher to assess a student's comprehension, and formative can be used before testing. So assessment in my classroom, in the past I have not documented any screening or diagnostic data, but I plan on making this more intentional and a part of my quarterly routine. In the past, formative assessment, I've kind of given, I haven't given feedback as immediately with every single formative assessment. I wasn't doing that with intention, and now that is something that I will keep in mind. But thank you for listening. I'm almost out of 15 minutes. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.